Hey, everybody, I'm Mark Caples, and you're listening to Obviously Wrong, brought to you by the Hard Knock School of Project Management, the 7 Hard Lessons I Learned the Hard Way, available on my website, leadershipknocks.com. The paperback book is out now, guys. It's half the price as the hardback. So if the price of admission is what's kept you from joining the School of Hard Knocks, tuition's half price, guys. So for months, I've written extensively about drought conditions in the Texas Hill Country. I've documented the dropping lake levels, the stressed aquifers, and the struggling communities. I've spoken on podcasts. I've written countless dispatches. And yes, I've prayed for rain. Many of us have. We've watched Canyon Lake shrink to historic lows, seen the Edwards Aquifer strain under demand, and witnessed the Guadalupe River reduced to a dry bed of stones. But I've been largely silent about the July 4th floods that devastated our region, not from lack of concern, but from an abundance of caution. When tragedy strikes with such force and complexity, when lives are lost and communities shattered, the responsible thing to do is wait. To let the facts emerge, to resist the urge for immediate hot takes when what's needed is careful analysis. Now, with weeks of investigation, reporting, and official assessments behind us, it's time to examine what happened and what it means for our understanding of water in the Texas Hill Country. There's a bitter irony here that I just can't ignore. Those of us who spent years pleading for precipitation got exactly what we asked for, delivered with a vengeance that reminds us to be careful what you pray for. My relationship with the Texas Hill Country flooding started early. My family moved here during the flood of 1998 when I was 12 years old. And I still remember walking through the parking lot of the grocery store afterward and staring at the pavement that had been peeled up and stacked in layers like geological strata. Water had done that. Water had rearranged asphalt. 4 years later, in 2002, I was in driver's ed when Canyon Lake spillway overflowed for the first and only time in recorded history. My driving instructor, recognizing the historical significance of the moment, had me drive up Skyline Drive to watch the water rush over the spillway from a higher vantage point. That flood created the Canyon Lake Gorge, carving a new landscape feature that tourists now visit regularly. It was a geological lesson in real time, and I was 16 years old watching history happen. Now, recently, the morning of July 4th, 2025, the Texas Hill Country experienced what can only be described as nature's cruel arithmetic. In the space of 45 minutes, the Guadalupe River near Kerrville rose over 26 feet, ultimately cresting at a record 37.52 feet by 5 a.m. of that morning. To put that into perspective, one gauge recorded a rise of more than 25 feet in just 2 hours. The rainfall came down at rates of 2 to 3 inches per hour. I'm talking the kind of rain that turns dry creek beds into raging rivers. This wasn't the gentle, soaking rain that we had prayed for during our drought years. This was a flood of biblical proportions. More than 130 people lost their lives in what became one of the deadliest flash flooding events in Texas Hill Country history. 59 of the confirmed deaths occurred in Kerr County alone. Among the most heartbreaking losses were 10 teenagers being evacuated from summer camps along the river, with 11 girls from Camp Mystic still missing as of the latest reports. The human stories behind these statistics reveal the terror of that night. In the Bumble Bee Hills subdivision, supposedly safe at 500 feet from the river and across Highway 39, Sean and Jay Ligon found themselves trapped as floodwaters rushed into their home. The 68-year-old couple pulled their dogs onto their bed and rose with the water until they were just feet from the ceiling. Jay grabbed floating debris and began smashing at the ceiling, desperately trying to break into the attic so that they could breathe. The tragedy was amplified by failures in emergency response that might have been prevented with proper preparation and adherence to established protocols. Both Kerr County Sheriff Larry Letha and William Dub Thomas, the county's emergency management director, were asleep when the flooding began, and Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly was out of town entirely. These absences were particularly damaging because each official held critical roles in the county's emergency response plan. Sheriff Letha had the primary responsibility for warning residents of the emergency with authority over evacuation orders and public safety communications. Dub Thomas, as emergency management director, was designated to coordinate the overall disaster response and had primary responsibility for evacuation duties. Judge Kelly, as the county's chief executive, was supposed to provide general guidance to disaster response and serve as the public face of emergency operations. Instead, when the disaster struck, the three officials who should have been leading the coordinated response were unavailable at the moment their community needed them the most. This left local first responders and city officials to improvise without county-level leadership and coordination that the emergency plan required. So, federal forecasters had issued their first flood warning at 1:14 a.m. on July 4th. A flood watch had been issued the previous day at 1:18 p.m. on July 3rd. Yet the county's top emergency officials were not monitoring the situation as their own plan required. The emergency management plan clearly outlined steps that should have been taken once the flood watch had been issued the previous afternoon. The plan called for informing the public and beginning evacuation of low-lying areas. To add fuel to this fire, Dub Thomas admitted to state legislators that Kerr County and Kerrville first responders had never conducted a countywide evacuation exercise, despite their own emergency plan stating that, quote, detailed emergency planning, training of emergency responders and other personnel, and conducting periodic emergency drills and exercises can improve our readiness to deal with emergency situations, end quote. The stories that emerged from that night are the kind that haunt a community forever. Camp counselors made split-second decisions about which children to save first when the water rose faster than anyone thought possible. Families were separated in the darkness, some losing everything, including each other. Emergency responders risked their lives again and again, pulling people from rooftops and cars, racing against currents that moved with the force of freight trains. At Camp Mystic, what should have been a summer of memories became a nightmare of loss. The 11 girls still missing represent not just statistics, but daughters, sisters, friends whose absence leaves holes in families and communities that may never heal. Their counselors, some barely older than the campers themselves, made heroic efforts to save as many as they could in conditions that would challenge seasoned rescue professionals. In the chaos of the flood and its aftermath, false information spread almost as quickly as the floodwaters themselves. The first was a wave of cloud seeding conspiracy theories that blamed the disaster on government weather modification programs. Despite zero evidence connecting the floods to any weather modification activities, these claims spread rapidly across social media platforms. The theories were so pervasive that the Texas Department of Agriculture was forced to issue official statements denying any connection between the floods and cloud seeding operations. These conspiracy theories not only spread falsehoods, but also diverted attention from the real factors that created the disaster and the genuine policy discussions needed for flood mitigation. Perhaps the most cruel was the spread of false rescue stories that gave families devastating hope. The most notable was a widely circulated story claiming that 3 missing girls had been found alive in a hollow tree 10 days after the floods, supposedly surviving on rainwater. Media outlets initially picked up and reported this story before having to issue retractions when it proved to be false. For families desperately searching for missing loved ones, these fabricated rescue stories represented emotional torture, raising and then crushing hopes during an already unimaginable ordeal. Sheriff's offices found themselves repeatedly warning the public to be careful about social media rumors and misinformation during active rescue operations. These false narratives weren't just harmless noise. They diverted precious emergency resources, caused unnecessary emotional devastation among families already desperate for news of loved ones, and complicated official response efforts. First responders found themselves having to debunk false reports while simultaneously trying to save lives. The lesson here is stark. In times of crisis, verify before you share, and trust official sources over social media speculation. The difference between truth and rumors can be the difference between hope and heartbreak for families in crisis. The destruction hit dead center in what's been dubbed Flash Flood Alley, a label that suddenly feels less academic and more like prophecy. The Hill Country's unique topography with, steep terrain and shallow soil over a limestone bedrock creates perfect conditions for rapid runoff when the skies open up. Despite being located in this high-risk area, Kerr County had repeatedly rejected opportunities to improve its flood warning capabilities. Over the last 9 years, the county had been denied federal funding for warning systems as local officials contended with a tax base that's hostile to government spending. Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly told reporters local residents had previously rejected the idea of a siren system because it cost too much. The lack of warning systems became tragically clear in neighborhoods like Bumble Bee Hills, where 27 of the 33 homes in that neighborhood flooded, despite being located what was considered a safe distance from the river. Most homeowners didn't even have flood insurance because in the worst previous flooding, the river had only come to the edge of the highway, a good 500 feet from any houses. The July 4th flood changed that calculation forever. The National Weather Service had issued warnings, noting that the nocturnal timing would enhance the hazard potential and impacts. But warnings, no matter how accurate, can only do so much when water moves this fast in the dark of the night. And so while official emergency systems failed, the Hill Country's response revealed something powerful about human resilience and community bonds. In neighborhoods like Bumble Bee Hills, neighbors who'd never spoken before became friends overnight. They helped each other clean out flooded houses and search for cars and trucks that had floated away and navigate the overwhelming task of rebuilding. Volunteers arrived from across Texas, many from faith-based organizations like Somebody Cares America. They tore out sheetrock, scraped up flooring, set up dehumidifiers, and brought hot meals and gift cards. GoFundMe campaigns emerged organically to help elderly residents who couldn't afford repairs on their fixed incomes. The grassroots response filled the gap left by inadequate official preparation. Where emergency protocols failed, neighbor-to-neighbor networks succeeded. Where warning systems didn't exist, residents relied on each other for survival and recovery. It's a reminder that when institutions fail, communities often find ways to heal themselves. Amid the tragedy, one piece of infrastructure performed exactly as designed: Canyon Lake. At the time of the flooding, the lake sat at just 46.3% of its conservation capacity, a low water line that hasn't been seen since the lake was first filled in the 1960s. A testament to the drought conditions we've been battling. But the spare capacity became our salvation. As floodwaters poured into the system, Canyon Lake rose dramatically, ultimately reaching 68% capacity by early August. The lake's surface elevation climbed to 892.6 feet above sea level, almost 15 feet higher than it measured a month before the flood, the highest water level the lake had seen since August of 2023. 6 boat ramps reopened for the first time since November, when the last of the lake's 23 ramps had been forced to close due to dangerously low water levels. In a twist of cruel irony, one disaster temporarily solved another crisis. But here's the sobering reality. Even with this devastating flood that killed more than 130 people, Canyon Lake would still need 2 more floods like it just to reach normal capacity. Despite rising to 68% capacity, the lake remains 16 feet below its full elevation of 909 feet above sea level. We're still that far behind after 5 years of drought and record levels of building and land development. This flood, as catastrophic as it was, didn't even come close to wiping out our water deficit. The flood's impact on Canyon Lake illustrates the complex hydrology of the hill country. Currently, about 186 cubic feet of water per second flow into the lake from the Guadalupe River, while the Guadalupe Blanco River Authority releases about 92 cubic feet per second from Canyon Dam to meet downstream water rights obligations. This careful balance between retention and release shows how even flood recovery must be managed within existing legal frameworks. Additionally, flash flooding events like this typically contribute to aquifer recharge. The region's limestone bedrock allows surface water to percolate into underground aquifers. Exactly how much is unknown, since recharge often takes months to measure accurately. The aquifer had been stressed by prolonged drought, so any significant recharge represents a critical component of long-term water recovery. And it's a reminder that our groundwater and surface water systems are intimately connected, and that extreme weather events, both droughts and floods, ripple through the entire hydrological cycle. This disaster shines a light on the paradox of water management in the Texas Hill Country. We live in a region defined by scarcity, punctuated by devastating abundance. Our normal is drought, conservation, and careful management of limited resources. But our reality includes periodic deluges that can kill, destroy, and reshape the landscape in a matter of hours. For those of us that have advocated for better drought preparedness, this flood serves as a humbling reminder that water management isn't just about having enough. It's about managing extremes at both ends of the spectrum. As we mourn the dead and begin the long process of recovery, we gotta learn. Water doesn't knock. It kicks the door in. But we can't just fear it. We have to outsmart it, outprepare it, and outlast it. The July 4th disaster revealed critical gaps in emergency preparedness that demand immediate attention. The failure to follow established emergency protocols, the lack of evacuation training, and the absence of adequate warning systems all contributed to the scale of this tragedy. The county's own emergency management plan warned, quote, "It is possible for a major disaster to occur at any time and at any place. Some emergency situations occur with little or no warning. end quote. Yet when that disaster came, local officials were unprepared despite having both the warnings and the playbook to respond appropriately. The plan clearly designated roles for evacuation, public warning, and emergency coordination, but those systems failed when they were needed the most. Look, the July 4th floods don't negate the importance of drought preparedness. Canyon Lake's spare capacity likely prevented an even worse catastrophe. But they do underscore the need for comprehensive flood mitigation, better early warning systems, proper training and execution of emergency protocols, and perhaps most importantly, a deeper respect for the power of water in all its forms. Look, moving forward, Kerr County and similar communities they got to invest not just in infrastructure, but in the training, the systems, and the leadership necessary to protect lives when disaster strikes. This means conducting regular evacuation exercises, ensuring emergency officials are available and monitoring conditions during weather events, and overcoming local resistance to essential safety investments. The psychological toll of these disasters extends far beyond the immediate physical damage. As Sean Ligon explained her reluctance to return to the home where she and her husband nearly died, quote, "I don't want to stay. I'm not going through this again. It was scary," end quote. Man, the trauma of believing that you're about to die in your own home, it changes people permanently. Recovery isn't just about rebuilding structures. It's about rebuilding the sense of safety that makes a house a home. We'll continue to pray for rain when the drought returns, and it will return. But we'll do so with a more complete understanding of both the blessing and the curse that water represents in the Texas Hill Country. We'll remember that in this landscape of limestone and live oaks, perpetual drought is indeed punctuated by periodic flooding. And both extremes demand our respect, preparation, and vigilance. The Texas Hill Country has always been a place where water writes the rules. July 4th, 2025 was simply the latest, most tragic chapter in that ongoing story. So here's your hashtag hard knock lesson in all of this. Water doesn't play fair, neither does leadership. Whether you're managing floodwaters or failures, prepare like everything's about to break. Because one day, it will.